Hey, this is the Entertainment Advice Channel. What I want to talk about today is the problem with retro themed music. So, when it comes to the problem with retro themed music, that is a new trend that's become popular in music in the past few years, which is just simply people making music sound like it was made in 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, is simply down to the fact that it kills the authenticity of being able to know that, I'm listening to a music that represents me, for that matter, and that's the truth of the matter. So let me explain in further detail what I mean. So what I mean by that is simply down to the fact that one of the most magical things about music is the ability to feel like you are actually living in the era that you're living in. Or in other words, music is the best at helping capture the era that you live in. Just like when you listen to music from the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, one of the things that makes it feel so magical, you know, and of course, previous decades before those decades as well, is the static sound because it makes you really feel like you are actually in the era that you're living in. Or in the 2000s, it could actually be surprisingly, ironically, the unnecessarily extremely high quality of the sounds because it was the beginning of a new decade. So, or not even this decade, new century, new millennium. My bad. It's the start of a new millennium. So everyone was trying so hard to be futuristic and stuff, which made the music, even by today's standards, sound unnecessarily very clean, because everyone was trying so hard to, of course, at the time, of course, trying to really differentiate themselves from the last century, for that matter, okay, to put it bluntly. So the truth of the matter is that is the honest truth about every music era, or in other words, decade, or just era, just to make things simple for that matter, okay? It helps capture the era that you're living in better, which makes the experience so much better when you listen to it. And most importantly of all, is it's just simply down to the fact that when I live in the era that I'm living in, I just kind of want to feel like I'm living in the era that I'm living in. It helps create a better experience for the person. Okay, just like in the 2000s and or 2000 and early 2010s and mid 2010s, you notice that they tend to have trends that, even though I know some stupid people online are going to say, oh, that stuff was so cringe. I don't know. I don't even get in those people. Those people are dumb. But anyway, regardless of the fact that it might come off as cringe, to some people, at least nowadays, it was entertaining to experience it because you truly feel like you were in an era that you lived in, at the time. Like if I were to go back to like 2006, 2007, and just in general the 2000s, you really felt like you're in the 2000s, If you could literally have a machine, that made you go back to that time period, you really would sometimes, especially it's always those situations where someone's driving a car and they're like playing their music out loud. You're just like, holy shit, I really am, let's just say for example, in 2005. Like, my god, I really am in 2005. Or it could be another example in the early 2010s when, of course, everyone's just talking about getting drunk and stuff, which, whether the message was good or not, when you lived in an era, that era for that matter, you really felt, my God, I'm in the early 2010s, in all honesty. I really feel like I'm in this era. And that makes the experience of life so much more interesting. Because when you actually feel like you're in the era that you're living in, it helps enhance the experience because you can, of course, not only create new memories and forget about maybe situations, if you've lived long enough, that maybe you don't want to remember, like certain types of people and even just straight up experiences you've had that are just not very good at all. It makes it easier for you to obviously move on. When you have music that helps capture the era that you live in, it just is more interesting because you really feel like you're living in the era that you live in, and it just enhances the experience overall because it's interesting to feel like, oh my god, I'm living in this era. Just like if you watch a sci-fi movie from like the 1990s, and like you live in an era where there's like flying, and they of course have like flying cars and stuff, you go like, oh my god, I really think this is cool, can you imagine actually living in this era? Like it helps immerse you to really feel like I'm living in this era. And if I really feel like I'm living in the 2020s, it just feels more enjoyable than just saying, okay, I just feel like, I, I am living in like, or at least when you're listening to music, you kind of get thoughts reminiscing about the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s instead of thinking about, oh my gosh, this is 2025. It just helps enhance the experience, and that's the truth of the matter. So, truth be told, in short, I absolutely hate this fact because the thing that is, I think, is causing this, for that matter, is that aside from, of course, corporations just being so dumb and stupid, in general. It's just the fact that I think the problem with it, everything from, of course, the corporations like I previously mentioned to some of the people who actually support it, is that people are trying so hard to recapture the magic of a bygone era, okay? Which I just absolutely hate when people do that. Like, they're trying so hard to really capture a feeling that is long gone instead of just creating new memories and experiences. Because, of course, if you lived in an era, there's experiences you had that, of course, surprise, you might have experienced that were good if you live long enough to experience the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, 2000s, whatever. I'm certain there are good memories you had. And I just think the fact that someone is just trying to recapture that so badly instead of just trying to move on and realize that you can create new great memories in the era that you live in instead of just thinking about things that happened so long ago is just lame to me, in honesty. Like, why can't I just feel like I'm in the 2020s? Why does everything have to feel like, oh, it's the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. Oh, I hate living in 2025. Oh, I hate living, of course, in the future, 2026 or 2027 or something. Why don't I just feel like I'm living in the time period I'm in? It just feels so much cooler to feel like I'm living this era versus this previous era that you don't even know if it's really all that great if you actually live through it, in honesty, and that's the truth of the matter. Besides, at the end of the day, the biggest reason why people have issues with modern theme music is simply down to the fact that when it comes to modern theme music, the truth of the matter is all that you need to do is simply make music that has better lyrics and varied beats, because a lot of the beats sound the same. And that's all that needs to be done. This whole shit about, okay, we're just going to try to recapture an era that happened so and so and so and so and so long ago, like to make up for the fact that the music nowadays sucks, for that matter, which I feel is the main reason why they do that, is just stupid. The reason why people hate modern theme music is because a lot of the lyrics, from the topics they cover to even just straight up down to the execution of the story that they're telling is just bad, in all honesty. And the beats all sound the freaking same. Why can't we just have music that just sounds like it, we actually are living in a new era that, of course, no surprise, actually has good quality lyrics and has beats that don't all sound the same? That's all you need to do. Wasting your time saying, oh, let's just make music sound like it did in 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and whatever, is not going to make your music sound any better. You can make music from that era and it still sucks bad. At least if it's seen from that era, it can still suck. So saying that, oh, we're just going to make it 1960s, 1980s because everyone hates modern music and of course 1990s, etc., is so dumb, and it's just not good for you because, like I was saying before, even aside from, of course, the more trivial point about just feeling like you want to live in an era that you're actually living in, because it makes the experience of life so much better. The truth of the matter is the biggest thing is the ability to move on. Because let's keep it real, especially for my millennials and even previous generations, since we live in an era now where obviously we are more educated and more knowledgeable than we were in the past, we obviously as a result are smart enough to know that common sense would indicate as well, but we all are smart enough to know that there's a lot of things that happened back then that I think are just best left forgotten, whether it could be people or even people you might know today that you had really ugly situations with, which I'm going to keep it real. A lot of us in that age group have had some memories that are just not even worth mentioning, because we lived in a time period where we didn't know the things we know now. And as a result, people might have said something and it was interpreted a different way, or might have did something. And, it just created situations that are not worth mentioning. So in short, we need to move on. And that's the truth of the matter. And this whole retro theme thing is not making it any better at all. Besides, the truth of the matter is when you listen to music, you know, what makes it good is the quality of the lyrics and a variation of the beat, not just trying to feel like, or trying to make it sound like something that happened a long time ago. And that's the truth. So in short, this retro theme stuff is stupid and needs to stop. And that's all I have to say.